Good afternoon, everyone. We are here today to launch a series of panel discussions in the space of consumer tech. As some of you may already know, Chiratae launched its first consumer tech report in April end and has been receiving some strong feedback and engagement from everyone in the ecosystem. To discuss more here, we have an exciting panel of speakers joining me today. Just to do a quick round of introductions, Nitin Agarwal, CEO of Globalbees, a unicorn startup in the house of brand space from Chiratae's own portfolio. Vishesh Khurana, co-founder of Shiprocket, another unicorn startup in the AI-driven logistic aggregation space. And last but not the least, Vaibhav Kamrakar, Senior Vice President at PGA Labs, who has helped co-author the report along with us as well. Good to have you here, gentlemen, and looking forward to an exciting conversation with all of you. Quick intro from my side. My name is Anoop, and I'm a principal in the investment team at Chiratae and head the consumer tech space for the fund. To kick things off, probably Vaibhav, you have anchored the report for us, and hence probably you're the best position to give us a perspective on how has the entire funding landscape in the consumer tech space changed over the years? What are the sort of segments where you have seen, seeing a lot of activity, right?
Yeah, so in the last couple of years, I think more than 40 billion has been invested or pumped in the consumer tech space. In the last 3 years itself, it has probably grown 1.5x every year. 2021 probably ended at roughly 18.2 billion. The largest spaces have been marketplaces, the likes of Ola, Swiggy, Cars24 with 13 billion, B2C e-commerce, another 12, then fintech probably at 9 billion, it is close third. But one of the outliers has been edtech, which has seen a tremendous increase. So from 0.5 billion probably in 2019 to roughly 5 billion in 2021, that's like a 10x growth. So while the base is small, but it has actually seen a lot of action in the last 2 to 3 years.
Great. The report also identifies, if I'm not wrong, the 4 key subsegments that we sort of saw significant interest in, isn't it, Vaibhav? Would you like to just touch upon it, elaborate it at a high level for us?
Sure. So we studied the mega trends that have really changed consumer behavior over the last decade or so, and as an outcome of that, try to identify some subsegments where this change is most pertinent, and as per different parameters like funding, startup founder activity, or even new emerging products or services. We identified couple of them. Number one being Commerce 2.0. Commerce 1.0 over the last decade was primarily about structured categories, faster deliveries, easier payments. It's fared well, but I think the new Commerce 2.0 is more about categories and particular customer demographics, which effectively don't shop in the traditional online models at all. So as in more relying on value conscious deals, relying on trust, in a way mimicking offline behavior. So I think that is number one. This has led to rise of social commerce, new brand creations, D2C. I think we have a lot of players, including Globalbees, doing some of that. And then there's also a sense of digital enablers coming up, which enable the ecosystem of these brands. So there's Commerce 2.0 being number one. Second, we saw creators economy, which is effectively the enterpriseization of customers, so to say, right? Where people ended up becoming businesses themselves, started directly making money. So this has primarily been because particularly led by one, internet penetration, but then also a lot of time people had by themselves during COVID and otherwise. So as in there was a reduction in hurdles for content creation. There was a good positive influence from their peers or even the responses from the audience. And there was a normalization of people working independently by themselves. And this has led to a lot of people either becoming teachers themselves or entertainment content creators and so on. So they've been able to earn a lot of money as well. So this is really one second subsegment that we have seen has a lot of potential. Third was online gaming and entertainment. I think that's a no-brainer. There's a lot of digital content being created, consumed. There's the Indian as an audience is quite young. There's a lot of time in hands. People are playing games, watching OTT content, audio, video, a lot of that. So I think this is a no-brainer. And the fourth was more need-driven, so to say, electric vehicle, rather shared mobility, the way we wanted to look at it. It is, as in the focus has been a lot on sustainability, ESG as well. The push on this is actually multifold, right? So there's
Got it.
new demand coming up, new supply being created in terms of manufacturers, but then also there's a lot of regulatory push by the government. So I think with that we were able to identify these four subsegments, which potentially are at the cusp of disruption for the next couple of years.
Great. Thanks, Vaibhav, for that overview. We're here to discuss today the first subsegment, right, which is the Commerce 2.0. That's what we call it. And I think who better to talk about this than Nitin, who has a ringside seat of sorts, witnessing this explosive growth that the space has been seeing over the last 12 to 18 months of sorts. So Nitin, just wanted to get your perspective on how critical a role is D2C, digital native brands, playing today in shaping up this entire online commerce story for us? And what specifically would have, in your view, was that inflection point which sort of led to this massive adoption, massive interest in this particular space?
Yeah, so the way we see it is not D2C or digital native, we call it a digital first. Because ultimately, you have to, as a brand, be present on a. So if you're on marketplace, you're not D2C, right? D2C is a Shopify store, Amazon kind of. In the US, they clearly classify Amazon store versus Shopify store, and D2C is more like Shopify stores rather than marketplaces. But see, a digital first, when you look at whether you sell it through the marketplaces, when you sell it through your own website, and so on and so forth, and then eventually there is a rub off where you distribute offline as well. The opportunity for this market actually was created to fill the need gaps. So historically, when you looked at the products, you had one product with a very, very deep penetration, right? And there are a lot of companies which have bought from a singular product. If you look at, things like Horlicks, right? It's a singular product, goes to the masses. Now, why that was required is basically offline. You could not create a niche demand segment product because it was difficult and impossible to distribute. And when these offline products just started selling online, there was online provided a specific need of small pockets across the India, which at a combined level was a big opportunity, but from an offline perspective was a very small opportunities because you could not target the every micro demand customer. And that created a lot of niche to be able to build the products in the white spaces, and these white spaces always existed. The online kind of provided the way to distribute the product to white spaces and build a business out of it. And that is what created this Web 2.0, and that is what created the digital native brands where people kept on making and deciphering more and niche white spaces, but at a combined level had a huge opportunity. And that is what has led to the explosion of it, the product. So today I can buy a simple thing. If I take a Horlicks, for example, I can extend that example. Horlicks has 8 brands today, right? But I can make a Horlicks with a whey protein, and I can make a Horlicks with a plant protein, and then I can make a Horlicks. So I can just cater to the demand. I can make a Horlicks for expecting mothers, feeding mothers between 1 to 3 months of baby, and then I can make it for teen, and I can even for a teen I can make separate for men, women. The amount of variation that I can make and target that subsegment has become massive. I think Healthcart, Muscle Blaze, if you see their products and some of the other players in the D2C market, targeting that niche, targeting that specific demand and customer choices has really been a way. And that's what the D2C brands have done beautifully.
Interesting. I think thought of filling that need gap. I think that continuum which needed products to serve those segment of consumers. I think that's probably what.
You have to realize that need cannot be served offline, and that's where the digital first and digital native brands come into play.
Got it. And when you overlay this entire thing, Nitin, with what you are venturing out to do at Globalbees, what was the thesis? How is aggregation as a play, going to span out from your perspective, especially given that India seems to be running almost parallel in the digital native brands starting up as well as many of the aggregation plays, house of brand plays starting up as well, almost with very limited time to scale independently, right? They're almost running parallel stories of sorts compared to many of the other economies where these had certain time, where which was spent before the brands could actually mature themselves and then look at an aggregation play of sorts. So just give us a thought in terms of your thesis when you went behind starting Globalbees. Yeah.
So, I mean, talking about the parallel, it's like India never had a pager economy. It just skipped a pager economy, and India has done that for various technology in terms of development. I think this is probably one of those eras where it just skipped a step and leapfrog to directly the next step. But I think from a value proposition, it's very simple. Again, when you are servicing the niche demand, there is one side which is a customer understanding and looking at the product, but then there is a whole different ball game where you have to look at supply chain, logistics, market efficiency, and that's literally 80-90% of business on a daily basis, right? Now, how can you build that at scale and build the efficiencies across your ecosystem play? So imagine it like today a Unilever, a P&G, any FMCG company, right? What have they done? They've made deep roots into our offline ecosystem, and they've continuously pumped 50, 100 brands into that ecosystem and launched that ecosystem. Now, online, you have to be able to do that in a similar fashion where you create that distribution ecosystem. Today, when you look at online distribution, you're looking at 20, 25, 30 platforms to distribute. It's not just one, right? It's an Amazon, a Flipkart, a Shopsy, a Meesho, a Dealshare, and blah, 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 right? And you need to be able to distribute to those platforms. And as you realize from offline, a modern trade is a very different animal than an institutional sales, than a GT channel, than to a dealer distribution channel, right? Every channel has its nuances. So similar to offline, online, creating that channel, creating that expertise, right from supply chain to marketing to technology and so on and so forth, is what is required by every brand. And so our thought was saying there is a common infrastructure which is required. India is a complex economy, much more complex than US. US, Amazon being a dominant player in e-commerce, it's still slightly less complex in terms of a market share for e-commerce. I think India, from that perspective, is a fairly well spread out into different ecosystem, and that's the ecosystem and infrastructure that we built. Bring out that synergies, bring out the products from the founders who had great insights of the products, and marry the two, and that's a winning formula of the business.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. Talking about market efficiencies, talking about supply chain, obviously someone at the cusp of it is Shiprocket, and Vishesh, probably a good time for you to sort of come in and just give your perspective about, we have heard some staggering numbers out there, right, in terms of what kind of volumes you handle: 200,000 odd deliveries per day, 75,000 merchants, 10 to 15,000 D2C brands. So what, in your perspective, is driving some of that? Just give us a view of how does Shiprocket approach this particular space and the kind of potential that it still has a headroom to grow as well.
Sure. So look, I'll quickly take a minute to explain where we started with, right? So it's been a decade-long journey. So we started in 2012 with a shopping cart platform. But I think the overall thesis and overall vision was to always democratize the whole e-commerce space, making it easier, making it affordable for everyone, and making it more participant heavy. So there should be enough people competing in this space. What the time back then, let's talk about 2012, 2015, those times we have seen people coming into the space as D2C brands, starting up a website using one of the platforms like ours or other platforms in the market. Shopify wasn't there, but there was Cartrocket and there were all these freelance developers, but it was still okay and cheaper to get the website up. But the challenge back then was from every angle apart from website. So website building was easy, marketing was expensive, getting an order was not, it was a knowledge gap there. There were not enough digital marketeers available. We were still starting up the whole ecosystem. So the resources needed for a successful D2C brand weren't available. That's where we saw people coming in, paying us for 6 months, churning out, and there was a high 60-70% churn in the business because no one could sustain their businesses the way they wanted to. Then post 2015, I think the enablement space, what we call them, so digital enablers and all these startups started coming in the market. Shopify entered the space, and with Shopify came the whole app ecosystem. Now with apps, you can actually improve conversions, get more orders, get more. So you could just plug and play apps using that ecosystem to solve a lot of issues that weren't that easy pre then. Then supply chain started building up. Delivery, which was a local player, started expanding out, built a national e-commerce express. Now we had e-commerce focused delivery and supply chain companies also scaling up versus traditionally when courier companies or carriers, when we used to talk to them back then,
Right.
e-commerce for them was a very small portion of their business. It was almost documents and detail heavy focused businesses. So for them, e-commerce was a very small blip in the system where it wasn't worth it to develop or innovate for them. But then we had startups coming in the space to change that whole thing. Now you have supply chain sorted, you have the whole order sorted, you have tools to improve your conversions, get more communication, CRMs, web engage type technologies. Now there are so much resources for a single D2C brand that they can just keep on plugging in and give an experience like a best e-commerce marketplace out there. And over the last, then of course, COVID gave this a boost. We saw a tectonic shift in behaviors. The whole behavior changed. And the best part about this was D2C could match up. They provided the same quality, the same innovative products that the market was expecting. They provided the same delivery and supply chain experience. They provided the customer experience needed like a marketplace. They were expecting returns, they were taking up calls, they were talking to their customers, getting feedbacks, innovating. So they matched up the demand that we saw coming up. And I think now the change is here to stay. We depend on them. The D2C brands are competing with the largest FMCGs or product companies out there, and they have made their niche and spaces in the ecosystem.
Got it. So, Vishesh, in terms of just what today Shiprocket handles, and that's probably, in my view, a sort of a pseudo to what is moving in the market as well, right? What are you moving across the country? Are there some quick highlights or snapshots in terms of what products, what categories, where geographies, where do you see this entire wave kicking in terms of consumption end of it? So, any insights which you can share with us?
Sure. So, unlike popular beliefs where people might think that metros are the demand pockets and tier two are the supporting ones, we are seeing the opposite of it. It's only purely because of access. Whereas metros will have access to a lot of retail, but tier two and tier three doesn't. And the platform we have is built for long tail. So all these long tail of sellers are actually focusing on tier two, tier three for distribution of their products. So at least from our platform point of view, we are seeing the other side of it, or the demand as a geography coming from tier two, tier three. The categories, I think we were very, very personal care heavy for a good year or two. I think the whole D2C space, there was a crowd of D2C brands coming, or personal care brands coming in. But now that's changing to niche brands where people are actually focusing on a niche problem, building products to solve that problem that could be as niche as curly hairs or as niche as. So I think now we are seeing those niches picking up as interesting as a niche like a cube, Ruby cubes, just a whole platform and a website built around selling Ruby cubes and nothing else. So now we're seeing that niche play is happening and people actually building fundamentally strong businesses in a very, very niche category. But with personal care, nutraceuticals, I think those are still the high performing categories on D2C.
Got it. Got it. In fact, I think one of our trends also, which we were trying to assess and which is we have covered in the report, is around personalization, and hence the niches play out as a very strong need, which which I think the brands try to solve for, right? Vaibhav, one of our key trends and the anchor trend of the report was in terms of some of these consumer tech startups today at the scale at which they are and having scaled significantly in India, their outlook towards global markets as well. Would you like to just touch upon that and give us your thoughts, and we can just go around the table after that? Yeah.
I think one of the aspects we covered was that the market is no longer local in a way. So with consumer at the fulcrum and with accessibility, either in terms of logistics, how Shiprocket does, or even in terms of D2C brands, or even export of services like EdTech globally. I think one angle or one way to look at it is there are not 1 billion, but 5 billion consumers in the world, probably a billion plus gamers, potentially $1 trillion plus market, right? If you just switch the lens from looking at India versus consumer at the center, but being global, I think the market expands multifold, and that's where I think one of the takeaways was that within these four subsegments, there is potentially an opportunity to create unicorns across all four of them in the next couple of years.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And we've seen that happen even in Chiratae's own portfolio, right? We have said this in many forums that 10% of our cumulative revenues of our portfolio is today coming from international markets. We expect that this number in the next 3 years could touch as much as 20 to 25% as well, given the kind of adoption that we're seeing in other markets also. Nitin, from your perspective, in terms of how different is the consumer brand landscape in global spaces? How easily how easy can this adoption be for an Indian brand to sell into some of those geographies? Or is there definitely is there a play beyond diaspora play as well, right, in terms of consumption? So as a brand owner, what are your thoughts on some of these aspects?
Okay, so international, actually, I think they're very little understanding in terms of international market. You have to clearly divide in terms of what are you working towards, right? And you have to go towards a consumer first approach. So there are two large trends, right? Is it your product that you have developed which you want to take to the international market, which is a very different proposition, versus saying, let me see what is the product or demand in that segment and what's the value add that I can do from India, whether it is because India is a fairly large, significant base for manufacturing. You have to do product modification and you build the product for that market. I think those two are very different approaches. And I believe a lot of people get confused between these two approaches, right? A simple thing, right? Apologies. A simple thing like a bed sheet, right? India makes large amount of cotton, right? It's not a China first product. It's still an India first product. Now you could be selling a 144 thread count printed bed sheet in India. You're doing amazing. But the moment you will go to some of the Western markets, it will go more solids. It will more go 400 thread count and a 500 thread count. But can you build for that? So your understanding for the international market on the product, not just saying I have this product and I want to sell international. I think that will not work, right? You have to understand each market, and every market will be different. A Middle East would be different than EU, than a UK, than a US, and a Canada, and a Mexico, and a Japan. The size of the beds will be different. Things like that. So you have to understand that nuances, adopt your category to that consumer, and then go international. So the demand and behavior remains the same, the opportunity remains the same, but you can't just pick a product and saying, okay, let me list on Amazon US and it's, that won't happen. So understanding coming from a customer first approach is always what will work, and you'll have to make your product adaptation for those international markets.
Got it, Nitin. Vishesh, on that same topic, right? I understand that many of the logistics and e-commerce enablers today from India are looking at how to support many of these digital native brands and also these consumer tech companies go global, right? How big is today overseas component of your logistics today? How much of that, and I'm assuming that there are specific products that you're coming up with to cater to that need which some of these brands are facing. And just to touch upon Nitin's point, how ready actually are some of these firms to even explore these markets, right? So just your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think similar to what happened with D2C in India, the ecosystem availability. Brands are actually, we have all the resources. Plus, if you look at how large D2C brands, some of them have crossed $1 billion mark, some of them are doing sales worth hundreds of $1 millions in turnovers. Now, after a point, you need to expand your market. I think a lot of brands are looking at global. Today, I think it's easily at $10 billion in space. We started our international product, Shiprocket X. It's still early, but we have seen significant traction in its early few weeks itself. We are live in Saudi Arabia as the platform. When we, in our journey of our business in Saudi Arabia and GCC regions, we saw a lot of Indian brands are already available there. So they have already moved in that direction. And from the market perspective, their adoption, their sales is doing very well. So clearly, the similar markets like India has actually done very well. The D2C brands have done super well in innovating good quality products actually. And globally, those products are getting accepted. Globally, people are now looking forward to India as a good quality product supply chain where it's coming from. So it's happening to us, I think, and people are ready. Now we have documentation and other compliance related things are getting easier. We have startups who have solved a lot of those things which were time consuming, where you could just go to a GCC region, you can find a company where they will become your distributor on record. They will take care of all the paperwork inside the region. They will take care of warehousing, partner with a company. So all you have to now do is one, ship your products out, take care of the licensing and others for country specific things licensing, then take care of marketing and the internal regional supply chain logistics, customer support. You need Arabic customer support. All of those resources are available. It's also getting easier to do this now.
Got it. And probably a question, I think you're most well positioned to answer this around the leverage of technology itself, right? You built an entirely a tech platform of sorts to build a scale model in logistics. Where else are you, or how else are you seeing technology play a role in the entire consumer tech space? In terms of specifically around shaping this entire commerce aspect in consumer tech, right? Where else do you see technology playing a role? What are probably some of your next tech interventions of sorts that we can get to see?
I think two very, very prime areas which have not yet been able to work out so far. One is the conversion optimization. Now it's high time where once you want to achieve a scale where people are, where conversion optimization will become a large enough problem for people to solve. Just improving that there is a radical technology changes that will happen in that direction. And the other is on-ground logistics. I think now it's all about speed. We have solved most of things, demand and everything else. Now the expectation is all around speed. And we are going to be one of those countries where, at least in my view, I think we will evolve so fast that faster than anyone could have imagined when it comes to logistics, solving logistics speed. I have met companies who are working on technologies that is predicting an order before even that's popping up, where they're telling you was in this pin code, these particular SKUs, there is a 96% probability that this order is going to come in next 5 days, ship your product there. So big data and things that we are now trying to get into consumers' head before even they think of you, right? We are predicting orders. We are predicting which regions, which products to be stored in. Now it's all about speed and experience of the whole delivery.
Got it.
I think those are two areas I see at least.
Got it. And Nitin, back to you on this in terms of the role of technology itself, right? We are not, we are a tech VC fund ourselves in Chiratae. We give a significant weightage in terms of how technology is not just an enabling layer, but at the core or at being tech-led in that sense in our portfolio. What role do you see that technology could play in the overall commerce space, and where else? And some of it was touched upon by Vishesh, but what are your experiences around what better can be done in that space?
Well, it's not about what role technology play. It is a technology business. I mean, the business itself is technology, right? From understanding a customer behavior to the shopping funnel that Vishesh talked about, to how you get the customer the fastest, what new product that you need to develop. Everything comes out of technology. It comes out from the digital footprint that the consumers leave, the behavior of their purchase behavior, the behavior of their funnel. So it's not about technology led and technology first. It's a technology business. I mean, that's how we look at it. Rest everything is what we call as supplementary, right? In that sense, the fundamental business is a technology business, right? You can call it a consumer tech business or tech consumer business. I mean, whichever way somebody wants to call it, but it is technology business, not technology led, and it touches every aspect, right? Right from product development to customer acquisition to funnel to optimization of your supply chain, bringing your cost down, everything, inventory planning. I mean, name a aspect, and it is technology first.
Got it. In this entire space of brands, because finally, consumer tech industry builds out strong brands, and that we have already seen many of these big names come up in that particular space. How how do you see the weightage between, or are these parts of the Lego blocks in that sense, where customer loyalty and retention, right? Especially when you look at the entire digital native brands, digital first, as you call it, digital first brand space. How do you build customer loyalty in that sense? And what else have you seen best in class retention metrics, or just give us a perspective? Because when I look at it as a technology business and vis-a-vis just a brand building exercise, because many of the moving pieces, be it manufacturing, product formulation, a few of these components seem to be significant overlaps between one startup to the other. And that's been one of the concerns that we have sort of kept away from a few spaces as well. How does customer loyalty get built in this kind of a space? What are some of the retention metrics that you drive in your portfolio as well? So just would like to get a perspective on that.
Yes, see, from a brand perspective, and especially when you're selling the brands to the third-party marketplaces and offline and so on and so forth, you have to understand that customer loyalty also will change from a category to category perspective, right? If you're doing simple thing like a large appliances, right? Now, typically for a particular appliance, your behavior will be once in 2 years to 7 years to 8 years, depending on the appliances, right? Now there, every customer is a new acquisition, and you have to make money on the transaction, right? And then you try to cross sell. And again, if you have your own platform, it's easier said than done, saying I've retained the customer and sell something. But when you're a brand, you have to build every product as a standalone and make sure that there is a brand and a recall value to that, right? But every product has to stand on its own in that sense and create that customer perception. Then when you look at some of the other categories like a consumption category, if you look at a beauty products, right? Beauty products is clearly divided into two segments. There is a repeat product behavior, like a shampoo and conditioner, people change less, but a body wash, I want a new fragrance every month, right? So you have to understand those behaviors, and then you have to see how you want to kind of target those categories and behavior of those categories. But I think from an overall loyalty and repeat purchases, I believe it's more relevant when you are running a platform and kind of become slightly less relevant from that perspective when you're running a brand, because anyways you don't have a customer data, right? So you kind of build a brand, and then every product you have to have work. I mean, there will be products on a leading brand which will fail, and that's why you see, right? I mean, if you look at a beauty and personal care, I mean, on one hand, a certain product like a face wash will be very popular from one brand, but a serum will be popular for another brand and a third product. So you have to look at product by product and build product by product and a customer perception to that.
Understood. Vishesh, just looking at the space of, say, social commerce, right, which is bringing up an entire new segment of sellers on, who are sellers, resellers, who are coming on to, driving this entire product to different parts and building a certain level of trust and influencer-led selling. What are the burning needs today that these e-com sellers today face in the country, right? Is it customer access? Is it tool stack, a tech stack or a SaaS set of SaaS tools to sort of digitize their entire workflow? Or is it purely even their own aspiration to go B2C, right, and go direct as well? So just give us your thoughts, because I'm sure you and some of your clients are sort of trying to deal with those kind of seller profiles and personas. Would love to get some thoughts on that.
Sure. Let me start with some numbers. I think in the beginning of the session, you mentioned there were about 75,000 active sellers on Shiprocket. Now there are 100,000. 10 to 15,000 of them are D2C, right? Like you rightly said. There is a long, long tail after that. Where does that come from? We have thousands on thousands of sellers who do not have a channel connected. And what I mean by that is there is no Shopify, there is no Amazon, the orders are being punched manually, each and every order using the mobile app. So they are punching in the name, the address, manually typing in. So there is no Excel uploads happening. There's nothing. This is pure social commerce space where they do the transaction on a channel like a WhatsApp or Instagram or anywhere, and then use the platform and punch those orders manually and then use the platform to ship. Their biggest challenge, I think, was not anymore, but it was about trust. I think the trust layer, the whole thing about if I do not get my product right, what will I do if they did not respond? Where is the hearing angle there? I think we do a lot of work there. We are trying to get between in the transaction, and we're saying that we are those intermediaries. We have a desk. The buyers can reach out to us, and we will ensure we get it solved through the seller. Because for seller, they might not be able to reject our calls because we are a service provider to them. So we do enter in that version. So that's being solved a lot. The other, I think, aspiration to go D2C is of course there, but for many large folks, it's not. Maybe 50% of them would like to. They are trying to build it using Instagram and social, and then go D2C. But a lot of them are not doing that. They are very happy with their generating income that's happening via Instagram. That's helping them do a certain things in their life, and they are contented. This is what they are using as a revenue generation strategy, and they make good couple of grands or 20, 30K extra household income, and they want to stick to that. The aspiration is not to grow that in a multinational business. This is more to support some things in the house, and that's a very, very wide audience in our country.
Understand. Got it. Some good insights in that, what you said, because I think we have seen a bunch of startups trying to build these stacks for sellers, right? And some of them, I think it's also an awareness process to try and say, what better can I do from the current manual processes that they're running, and how quickly can they sort of scale their businesses and improve efficiencies in what they're doing, right?
Yeah. So, I think matter of time with Instagram shops coming in, WhatsApp commerce. Now you can actually use WhatsApp APIs to do integration. So we have a WhatsApp bot that folks can just integrate, and the bot can ask the most common questions: what's your name, what's your address, what's your number, and then punch it into our system. So these are redundant tasks that they would not want to do it daily and avoid the chance of a mistake. So those technologies will definitely help them, but I think getting a whole full-blown website is still not an aspiration for most of the folks right now.
Got it. Nitin, one question which I wanted to just pose to you is, you are also acquiring, or you're also investing into brands, right, as Globalbees. When some of the investors and VCs look at the space, we find a lot of Me Too D2C brands out there, right? I did talk about differentiation. What are those differentiators that you as an investor, you as a acquirer of sorts, who's looking to aggregate some of these brands, look for, and where do those differentiators actually come from? Is this the customer segmentation conversation that we had some time back, where a need gap and they're serving a specific need, or are there any other levers that as an investor that you would watch out for?
So the way we are different from a venture capital or private equity, for that matter, is, see, for us, in a founder and a product, a consumer understanding and the product is very important. And then we obviously have a top-down approach where we have our own research and see the white spaces. And that's what we look for, right? We are okay if For a venture capital, for example, a holistic team will be involved. A technology co-founder, somebody who understands supply chain, somebody who understands marketing. For us, those things we can take care, right? For us, the most important thing is how strong the team and the founder is on the product and customer side. And that becomes a key criteria for the acquisition. And even if they are not so great and have gaps in the other places, we are perfectly there to fit in and take that burden away. So that provides us a larger landscape and opportunity to look at, go deep and look at higher concentration of people which are very, very focused on the product and customer insight.
Got it. Obviously, I'm not going to let you go today without having a question in terms of when I saw the profile, and we've not probably chatted offline about it, but from financial services to consumer tech, that would have been a massive shift from your own background perspective. And today, as you said, you are looking at least the founder who has a good understanding. So what are today some of these attributes that a founder in consumer tech space carries, and what probably are some of your learnings which made you transition to this kind of a space sort of seamlessly as well, and leading one of the leading companies today in India in consumer tech?
I think, I've worked in multiple industries, from banking to software services, and then financial services and a consumer tech. For me, I think there are two or three aspects which is good, right? Start always with not the segment, not the category. Start with the consumer. Every time when you start with a consumer, you will get that industry right, and the process then remains. Start solving for consumer one by one. Start solving for the problem one by one, and then rest is kind of easy. So I think most of the people, where they make a mistake, is saying, "Oh, I felt that need. That's why I think the world needs it, and let me build it." Right? And then they stop answering and saying, "Okay, how many such people are there?" Right? And am I listening to the consumer? And so, moment your approach becomes a customer first in terms of listening to it, and you take away the personal bias, I think industry kind of doesn't matter. Financial industry works in the same way, software services works in the same way. Listen to the consumer, solve for them, prioritize one by one, and solve for it. The moment you take that approach, I think industry becomes kind of irrelevant, right? You will find enough and more people with knowledge of verticals and great service providers and partners, like Shiprocket is doing on the logistics side. You will find people in the marketing. So in a way, every industry will have this specialized service provider to build it. I think the ability to listen to the customer and solve for it and bring the right partners is what is required. And then I think industry becomes relevant.
Great. On that note, in terms of entrepreneurship, probably, Vaibhav, I wanted to get your quick thoughts. The report obviously targets not only in general investors and other ecosystem enablers, but also looks at providing an insight to some of the entrepreneurs. What according to you are some of the key takeaways from our report, which the early founders today can take away, and try to look at in greater depth?
I think building on what Nitin just said, right? Focus on the consumer. So then, as in effectively, and this is something that we have covered in the report as well, that consumer is at the fulcrum of opportunities across multiple sectors, be it healthcare, financial services, education, or whatever. Ultimately, there is some product or service being consumed by that particular individual. And if you're solving for that, I think there is a lot of opportunity. And the way we have tried to structure this report is trying to identify some of those white spaces potentially. As in, there are opportunities for disruption. I think any entrepreneur can actually look at them and identify places where currently the problem is not solved, or if solved, it's not being done so efficiently. So there are opportunities across those segments, or even otherwise, right? As long as the consumer remains the focus, there are opportunities to create new startups even today.
Great. On that note, probably just going to our last segment, which I just sort of have a few rapid fire sort of questions. Would love to just see some spontaneity, short answers. Nitin, we'll begin with you, then probably Vishesh, and then move around to Vaibhav. Just do a round robin of sorts. The first one which I have here, Nitin, from your perspective, is ONDC, right? positive, negative for existing e-com players, marketplaces, and brands? So what's your first take on what's getting built there?
A lot of unanswered questions.
Okay. Vishesh?
Definitely from what we know so far is positive. I think it's the need.
Got it. Vaibhav, what are you hearing from the industry folks?
I think it is to the tune borderline positive, as in if the concept note is great, how it evolves, how the technology enables that supply chain and potentially even service the consumer right. As in platform is great, but at the end, the experience needs to be really world class, which some of the leading tech players have been able to provide. So as long as the service experience remains, it should actually turn out to be positive.
Great. The next one which I have is around the quick commerce, instant commerce models, right? Nitin, is it a consumer behavior shift which you are seeing, or probably just a short-term blip and trying to, just come out of the COVID environments, hybrid work environments, etc.?
Consumer behavior, definitely a shift. Viability, I still don't know.
Okay. Vishesh, over to you.
I think answer is same. I think there's a definite consumer behavior shift. If it is not shifting, people will shift it. So yeah.
Okay. What is your sense on that?
So we actually, on a different note, just recently conducted a study in this space to really understand how the selection criterias have changed specifically in Q-commerce. And we are able to see there are clear needs for different kinds of requirements. So there is one kind of expectations from a monthly grocery purchase kind of a platform, and there's a different expectation from a quick commerce. And surprisingly, price is now not the topmost criteria. So even knowing that the price is higher for some of those instant gratification needs, people are still willing to pay for that. So as in, I think it is there to stay. There has been a definite shift, and even the priorities from being only a value conscious consumer to a need driven consumer, I think that has definitely happened.
Cool. That's a great perspective. Nitin, India 100% EV in, say, at least logistics in next 5 years, possible or a distant dream?
Intra-city, possible. Cross-country, I don't think so.
Great. Vishesh?
It's definitely possible. And I think from a cost standpoint, people will take up that change.
Got it. Vaibhav, what about you?
I think this is something we touched upon in the report. The total cost of ownership, let's say assume a certain kilometers being driven and then the cost of acquiring that asset. I think there is still some distance to cover for it to become 100% EV, especially in the intrastate travel, like Nitin mentioned. As long as the range is still a concern that you can drive from morning to evening without waiting for a charge, till that point that happens, it's difficult for 100%.
Great. That's pretty much it, gentlemen. Absolutely delightful, chatting up, speaking to you, and getting some great insights into the nuts and bolts that are shaping this commerce space in consumer tech. For our viewers here, as mentioned in the beginning, this is one of the many panel discussions that we're holding in the 4 emerging themes, which we have carved out in the Chiratae PGA Labs first consumer tech report that launched earlier this month. You'll find the link in the comment section, so feel free to take a look at it, write to us, share your feedbacks, and founders who are building out, we're just an email away as well. Thanks to the panelists here for taking time out. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.